The desert wind carried dust through the crooked fence posts of a poor man's homestead, a place more empty than alive. Inside the cabin, 16-year-old Mary sat silently by the hearth. Her round shoulders slumped forward as though the weight of the world pressed down on her back. She was large for her age, plump to the point that townsfolk whispered and sneered when she passed. Her own father had long looked at her not with love, but with irritation, as though her body were proof of failure. Her father, William, was a man drowning in debt. His crops had failed 2 seasons in a row, and the bank had threatened to seize the land. But instead of courage, William sought escape. And escape came to him one night in the form of an Apache warrior. The man was tall, broad-shouldered, and silent as stone. He had appeared at William's door at dusk, his horse stamping the ground impatiently. William's eyes lit up with a greedy gleam. He had heard rumors of tribes trading horses, hides, and weapons. Now he saw more than trade. He saw a way to rid himself of what he called his burden. Mary didn't know what. The men spoke about when they stepped outside, but the low murmur of their voices and the way her father avoided her eyes afterward filled her with dread. That night, William's voice cracked like a whip. "Pack your things, girl. Tomorrow you'll be going with him." Mary's heart thudded. "With him? Father, what do you mean?" "You'll do as I say," William snapped. "It's settled. You'll have a new home." "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," she wanted to protest, to cling to the hope that her father had some shred of compassion left for her. But she saw the coldness in his eyes. This wasn't protection. It was betrayal. The next morning the deal was done. 2 strong horses, a bundle of pelts, and a pouch of silver coins exchanged hands. William never looked back at his daughter as she climbed awkwardly onto the stranger's horse. For him, the trade was finished. For Mary, life as she had known it ended. As they rode away, the tears on her cheeks dried quickly under the burning sun. Fear gnawed at her belly. What would this Apache do to her? Stories in town painted his kind as savages, ruthless, and cruel. She imagined whips, chains, or worse. Shame burned her even deeper. Her own father had sold her like livestock. Was she worth nothing more? But as the miles stretched behind them, Mary noticed something strange. The Apache man did not leer at her or bark commands. He rode in silence, steady and patient, slowing his horse when hers lagged, offering her water when her lips cracked with thirst. His eyes, when they met hers, were not cruel but unreadable calm, like still water hiding its depth. Mary hugged herself, torn between terror and a flicker of confusion. Why hadn't he mocked her as others had? Why hadn't he spoken a single harsh word? By the time the sun dipped low and painted the desert sky with streaks of fire, Mary's fear was tangled with curiosity. The bargain was sealed, but she could not shake the question that pulsed in her mind. What plans did this wild Apache truly have for her? She only knew one thing for certain. Whatever awaited her would be nothing like the life she had left behind. The desert stretched endlessly, a sea of pale earth and scattered brush. Mary swayed uneasily in the saddle, her thighs sore from the long ride. She had never ridden so far in her life. Her mind kept circling the same thought. Why had her father sold her? It wasn't a question anymore, though. She knew the answer. To William, she had always been too heavy, too clumsy, too much of a reminder of failure. He saw her as a mouth to feed, not a daughter to love. The Apache warrior rode ahead, his figure steady against the blazing horizon. His hair was dark and tied back with leather, his back straight as a pine. He hadn't spoken much, not a word of comfort nor a threat, only a hand gesture when it was time to drink or rest. Mary watched him cautiously, waiting for cruelty to reveal itself. At noon, the man stopped near a cluster of mesquite trees where a thin trickle of water seeped from the rocks. He dismounted with the grace of someone who belonged to the land and motioned for her to drink. Mary slid down clumsily, nearly stumbling. She braced herself for laughter or scorn, but none came. Instead, the man crouched by the spring and filled a water skin, handing it to her without a word. His gaze was steady, unreadable, yet strangely free of judgment. Mary gulped the cool water, her parched throat easing. Still, suspicion lingered. "Why? Why did you take me?" she asked hesitantly, clutching the water skin to her chest. He looked at her for a long moment, then turned back to his horse. No answer, only silence. Mary's stomach tightened. She wanted words, even harsh ones, to ease the uncertainty. Instead, she was left to imagine terrible fates. Perhaps he was saving his cruelty for later. Perhaps he saw no need to speak to her, as if she were beneath him. They continued on, mile after mile, the sun crawling west. Yet each time her horse lagged, he slowed his pace. When she slipped trying to remount, he offered his arm, not mocking, only steady. These small acts of care confused her more than silence ever could. By late afternoon, hunger gnawed at her belly. She had eaten nothing since dawn. As they rode into a small canyon, the Apache stopped again. From his saddlebag he drew a strip of dried venison and passed it to her. Mary hesitated, then took it. "Thank you," she murmured. This time, his lips curved slightly, not quite a smile, but not indifference either. It startled her, for it was the first trace of warmth she had seen. They camped under the open sky that night, a fire crackling between them. Mary pulled her shawl tight, staring at the flames, her mind a storm of fear and curiosity. The Apache sat across from her, carving wood with a steady hand. The firelight caught the sharp lines of his face, making him look both fierce and calm, a contradiction she could not unravel. She found her voice again, softer now. "My father. He doesn't want me. That's why he gave me away." Her throat thickened with the words. "You don't have to pretend. I know I'm a burden." For the first time, he raised his eyes to hers. His dark gaze was steady, deep, and piercing, as though he could see past her words and into the wounded heart behind them. He said nothing, but the weight of his silence was different this time, not empty, but deliberate. Mary looked away, cheeks burning. Maybe words weren't necessary. Maybe he had plans she couldn't yet guess. Plans not born from mockery or cruelty. As she lay down that night beneath a sky of endless stars, her fear had not vanished, but it had shifted. It was no longer just dread of what he might do, but a deeper unease. What if this man saw more in her than she had ever seen in herself? Sleep came slowly, tangled with that dangerous question. By the third day, Mary's body ached from the endless ride, but her spirit was even more weary. She had expected torment or violence from the Apache, but instead found herself living in the silence between her fears and his strange patience. Every gesture of kindness, slowing his horse, offering food, building a fire, only unsettled her further. Why? She kept asking herself. Why hasn't he treated me the way everyone else does? Late in the afternoon, the canyon widened into a stretch of grassland dotted with cottonwood trees. Beyond, nestled against a ridge, smoke curled gently from a ring of lodges. Her heart stuttered in her chest. This was it, the Apache's camp. Whatever plans he had for her would be revealed here. As they approached, children darted between the lodges, laughing. Dogs barked, and women stopped their work to glance toward the newcomers. Mary tugged her shawl tighter around herself, feeling the stares burn into her. Her cheeks flushed with shame. She expected mocking whispers or cruel laughter at her size, the kind she had known all her life. But to her shock, none came. The women's eyes lingered, yes, but not with ridicule. One older woman approached, her braids silvered with age. She touched Mary's arm gently, speaking words Mary could not understand. The tone, however, was unmistakable. Welcoming. The Apache warrior dismounted and helped Mary down from her horse. His touch was firm but respectful, guiding her forward as if she were a guest, not a captive. He spoke briefly to the silver-haired woman, who nodded and smiled at Mary before beckoning her toward a lodge. Inside, the air was warm with the scent of smoke and herbs. Two younger women offered her fresh clothing, soft buckskin stitched with beads. Mary froze, clutching her threadbare dress. Why would they give me this? Why treat me kindly when I was brought here as nothing but a trade? Reluctantly, she changed. The garments were surprisingly comfortable, fitting her frame without mockery or alteration. For once, she did not feel squeezed or judged by fabric meant for smaller girls. When she stepped outside again, the women smiled. Nodding approval, her Apache escort watched silently, his dark eyes unreadable. Mary braced herself, expecting him to claim her then and there, to announce she was his bride or servant. Instead, he simply inclined his head, as though acknowledging her presence with quiet respect, before turning to tend to his horse. The confusion gnawed at her more fiercely than fear. Her father had treated her like a burden. Strangers in town had ridiculed her. Yet here, among people who owed her nothing, she was met with dignity. That night, she sat by the fire among the women, eating a stew rich with venison and roots. The children peeked at her curiously but without cruelty, their laughter light and harmless. For the first time in her memory, no one's eyes carried disdain, but Mary could not silence the voice in her head. It cannot last. Sooner or later, I'll learn the price of being traded like goods. As if sensing her turmoil, the Apache warrior finally spoke. His voice was deep and measured. You are safe here. Mary blinked, stunned by the words. Safe? She hadn't felt safe in years, not in her father's house, not in town, not even in her own skin. What do you mean? She whispered. He met her gaze across the fire, his expression steady, calm, and unreadable as ever. You will see. The answer both comforted and unsettled her. For the first time, she began to wonder if the bargain her father struck had not doomed her, but saved her. The days slipped by in a rhythm Mary had never known. Morning light filtered through the lodge as the women stirred the fires. Children's laughter rang in the air, and the men rode out to hunt or scout. She was given simple tasks, gathering wood, grinding corn, helping to cook. None of it was forced upon her. The women guided her gently, as if teaching rather than commanding, and all the while, the Apache warrior, the man who had taken her from her father's cabin, watched quietly from a distance. He was neither cold nor possessive, but his presence was constant, steady as a mountain on the horizon. Mary's heart twisted with unease. She couldn't understand why she wasn't treated as a slave or a bride. The mystery gnawed at her until she could no longer keep silent. One evening, when the fire crackled low and the camp settled into quiet, she approached him. Her hands trembled as she clutched her shawl. "Why did you bring me here?" she asked, her voice breaking with the weight of weeks of confusion. "What do you want from me?" The warrior looked at her for a long time, his dark eyes reflecting the firelight. At last he spoke, his voice deep and calm. "I wanted to save you." Mary stared, stunned. "Save me?" "My father sold me to you." He nodded once, slow and deliberate. "I saw the way he looked at you. Not as a father. Not as blood. Only as a man trading away something he did not want." His jaw tightened. "I could not leave you there." Her chest constricted, a storm of anger and disbelief swirling inside her. "So, you didn't buy me? You didn't bring me here to—" Her voice faltered, unable to finish the word that had haunted her nights. "No." His reply was firm, almost sharp. Then softer, "You are not a burden." "Not here." Tears stung her eyes, hot and unrelenting. She sank to the ground, her heart breaking all over again, not from fear this time, but from the weight of his words. Not a burden. She had never heard those words from anyone. not even her mother before she died. He crouched beside her, his hand hovering before finally resting gently on her shoulder. Your father saw only your body. I see more, strength, spirit, fire not yet woken. Mary shook her head, her voice thick. I'm no one. I'm nothing but a girl too big for dresses, too clumsy for anyone to want. His gaze was steady, unwavering. That is what others told you. But it is not the truth. For a moment, silence pressed around them, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Mary felt the ground shift beneath her understanding of herself. She had lived 16 years believing she was worthless, believing every sneer and insult. Yet here was a man who owed her nothing, telling her she was more than the world had ever allowed her to be. Finally, she whispered, "What do you want me to do?" His lips curved, not a smile, but something close. I want you to learn. To see your worth. To be strong. No one will trade you again, her breath caught. These were not the words of an owner or captor. They were the words of someone offering freedom. That night, lying beneath the starlit sky, Mary's thoughts tumbled. Her father had sold her like cattle. Yet the Apache's shocking plan was not cruelty or claim, it was something far more bewildering. He wanted to give her back what life had stolen, her dignity, her strength, her chance to be more than shame. For the first time in her life, Mary dared to believe she might not always live in the shadow of her father's rejection. She might, with this man's guidance, discover who she truly was, and that possibility terrified her almost as much as it thrilled her. The following weeks brought Mary into a life she had never imagined. Each sunrise began not with her father's scornful bark, but with the gentle stir of camp, the sound of women grinding corn, the laughter of children, the crackle of firewood. She was no longer shut away like a shameful secret. Here, every pair of hands mattered, and hers were welcome. At first, her body resisted the new demands. Grinding corn left her arms aching, and gathering wood made her legs burn. Yet instead of mockery, the women encouraged her, showing her better ways to balance the load, how to pace herself. One young woman named Talila became her closest companion, teaching her songs as they worked. Mary laughed for the first time in months, the sound startling her as though it belonged to someone else. The Apache warrior, whose name she learned was Koa, remained a steady presence. He did not hover but appeared when she faltered. He showed her how to ride more easily, how to guide her horse with confidence. He placed a bow in her hands, steadying her grip, teaching her how to draw the string. Her arms trembled, her aim wavered, but his voice was patient. Again, he would say, never scolding, only urging. One afternoon, when she finally struck the target, the children whooped with delight. Mary's cheeks flushed, not with shame this time, but with pride. For once, her body felt like more than a burden, it felt capable. At night, by the fire, she listened to the elders tell stories. They spoke of ancestors who endured hardship, of warriors who protected their people, of women whose wisdom guided generations. She realized that here, value was not measured in appearances but in spirit and contribution. Slowly, the walls of self-loathing that her father and the townsfolk had built around her began to crack. Still, doubt lingered. Sometimes Mary would catch her reflection in a pool of water and feel the old shame rise. She would pull her shawl tighter, remembering the whispers and cruel laughter of her past. Koa seemed to notice these moments. He never scolded her, but his eyes would meet hers with quiet strength, as if saying without words, "Do not let them define you." One evening, after a long day of gathering herbs, Mary sank beside the fire, exhausted. Koa approached, carrying a bundle of sticks. He set them down and crouched beside her. "You learn quickly," he said simply. Mary blinked at him. "Quickly? I'm slow. I drop things. I get tired. Everyone drops things. Everyone tires. His gaze was calm, steady. But you keep trying. That is strength. The words settled into her chest like a flame. Strength. She had never thought of herself that way. That night, as she lay beneath the vast blanket of stars, Mary realized something had changed. She no longer felt like a girl discarded, unwanted. She was becoming part of something larger, a rhythm of work, of learning, of belonging. The burden her father had cast aside was slowly being reshaped into someone with purpose. But deep inside, Mary knew the world outside this camp had not changed. Her father still lived with his greed. The town still whispered with cruelty. And sooner or later, someone would come to test this fragile new life she was building. For now, though, she allowed herself the rare gift of hope. Hope that perhaps she was not meant to be a shadow of shame but a girl of strength, fire, and worth. The sun was high when the warning cry came. Mary had been gathering berries with Talila near the stream when the sound of hooves thundered in the distance. Dust rose like smoke beyond the ridge. Talila's face tightened, and she grabbed Mary's hand. Pulling her back toward Camp. By the time they reached the lodges, the men were already mounting horses, bows, and rifles in hand. Children were ushered into the safety of the lodges while the women gathered behind them. Mary's heart pounded as she saw the riders cresting the ridge, white men from town. A small band led by none other than her father. Her knees went weak. William's face was red with fury, his hand gripping the reins of a borrowed horse. Behind him, 2 other men carried rifles across their saddles. "Bring her out." William roared the moment they drew close. "That's my daughter you've got hidden here, and I'll have her back." Mary froze. The words stung like poison. His daughter? She remembered his cold eyes as he traded her away for pelts and silver. Now he claimed her, not out of love, but because gossip in town had twisted the story. People whispered he had been cheated, that the Apache had stolen her instead of buying her fair. The Apache men formed a line, their faces grim. Koa stepped forward, his presence calm but commanding. "She is safe here," he said in measured English. "You gave her away." "You have no claim." William spat into the dirt. "She's mine by blood, and I'll not have her kept by savages. Hand her over, or we'll take her by force." Mary's hand shook as she stepped out from the circle of women. The tribe murmured in surprise, but she couldn't stay silent. Not now. Not when her father dared to pretend he cared. "I'm not yours," she said, her voice trembling but loud enough to carry. "You sold me like an animal. You never wanted me. Don't you dare stand here and call me your daughter." William's face twisted with rage. "Ungrateful girl. After all I've done to feed you, house you. Feed me?" Mary's voice cracked like thunder, her fear melting into fury. "You fed me scraps and shame? You never saw me as more than a burden." Tears burned her eyes, but she didn't stop. "I'd rather stay here among people who treat me with dignity than go back to your cruelty." The silence that followed was heavy. William's mouth worked, but no words came. The men beside him shifted uneasily, uncertain. They had expected a frightened girl begging to be taken home. Instead, they saw someone standing tall, defying the man who had traded her away. Koa's voice broke the silence, steady and firm. "You heard her. She stays." His hand rested lightly on the hilt of his knife, not threatening, but resolute. William's jaw clenched. He turned his horse sharply, glaring at Mary one last time. "You'll regret this. Mark me. Girl, you'll regret it." The men wheeled their horses and rode off in a cloud of dust. When the sound of hooves faded, Mary's strength broke. She collapsed to her knees, sobs shaking her shoulders. Talila rushed to her side, wrapping an arm around her. But through the tears, something new glowed in her chest. She had spoken. She had faced her father and thrown off the weight of his scorn. For the first time, her voice had not been silenced. Koa crouched before her, his eyes steady. "You were strong," he said simply. Mary swallowed hard, wiping her tears. "I was terrified." His lips curved faintly. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is standing, even when fear is heavy. Her father's shadow still lingered in her heart, but that day she had torn free from its grip. And though conflict had found her, so had her strength. The camp settled again after William's departure, but for Mary, nothing felt the same. The memory of standing before her father, speaking words she never thought she had the courage to say, burned inside her like a fire that would not go out. For years she had swallowed every insult, every cruel glance, every whisper that told her she was too much or not enough. Now, for the first time, her voice had shattered those chains, but with that fire came unease. What if William returned? With more men? What if her defiance brought danger upon the tribe? These thoughts pressed on her, yet instead of crumbling beneath them, Mary found herself determined. She could not go back to being the girl who cowered in the corner. The next morning, she asked Tallulah to teach her more of the women's work, how to weave baskets, how to gather herbs for medicine, how to stitch leather with careful hands. The women smiled at her eagerness, guiding her patiently. Her fingers fumbled at first, but Mary did not give up. Each mistake became another chance to try again. In the afternoons, she sought Koa. He tested her endurance, taking her farther on horseback, showing her hidden trails through the desert. He gave her a staff and taught her how to defend herself, step by step. Mary's body, once the source of so much shame, revealed unexpected strength. Her arms carried loads others struggled with. Her legs endured long treks without faltering. "You see?" Koa said one evening after she had managed to fend him off during a sparring match. "What you thought weakness is power." Mary laughed breathlessly, sweat dripping down her brow. "Power? I've never been called that before." "Then let it be the first of many times." His gaze was steady, and for a heartbeat she felt something shift between them, something deeper than teacher and student. She quickly looked away, her cheeks warmed out at night. Mary often replayed the confrontation with her father in her mind. Each time she felt the tremble in her hands, the pounding in her chest. But she also remembered the way her words had silenced him. She had been small beneath his anger, but her truth had stood taller than him. That memory gave her strength. One evening, as the tribe gathered for a small feast after a successful hunt, one of the elders asked Mary to speak. She froze at first, her old fears pressing in. But the faces around her were not cruel, they were patient, expectant, encouraging. "I," her voice faltered, but then she straightened her shoulders. "I am grateful. You have given me more than food and shelter. You have given me respect. You have shown me that I am not worthless." Her throat tightened, but she continued. "I want to learn. I want to give back what you have given me." A hush fell over the gathering. Then the elder nodded, his lined face breaking into a smile. "You have spirit. That spirit makes you one of us." The people murmured in agreement, and Mary's chest swelled with a strange, wonderful pride. For the first time in her life she belonged. Later that night, as she sat beneath the stars, she whispered to herself, "I am not a burden. I am not nothing. I am. Ami." The words felt fragile, but real, like the first green shoots breaking through winter's frost. Mary did not yet know what challenges lay ahead, but she knew one truth: she would never again let anyone silence her. Her awakening had begun, and she would not let it fade. The fire crackled low one evening as the camp grew quiet, stars stretching wide above the desert sky. Mary sat cross-legged near the embers, weaving strands of grass into a rough braid. Her hands moved with more confidence now, her body no longer shrinking with self-consciousness. She had grown stronger, steadier. And yet one question still pressed in her heart, one she could not keep buried any longer. Why had Koa truly brought her here? She found him seated a short distance away, sharpening a knife by firelight. His face was calm as always, the planes of it sharp in the glow. Gathering her courage, Mary rose and walked to him. "Koa," she said softly. He lifted his gaze, silent, waiting. "I need to know the truth." Her voice trembled but held. "Why me? Why did you bring me here when you could have turned away like everyone else? Was I just pity?" The word burned on her tongue, the old wound still raw. Koa set the knife aside and regarded her steadily. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, finally, he spoke. "When I saw your father trade you, I saw more than cruelty. I saw a man trying to throw away fire he could not control." He leaned forward slightly. "I did not take you out of pity. I took you because I knew you deserved the chance to choose your own path." Mary blinked, startled. "Choose?" He nodded. "Your father decided your worth. The town judged your body, not your spirit. Here, I wanted you to see yourself differently. Not as a burden, not as a trade, but as someone with strength. With freedom." Her throat tightened. Freedom. She had never dared to dream of it. Her father's voice had always drowned it out, insisting she was nothing more than his responsibility, his shame. Koa's eyes softened, his voice steady. "I never planned to claim you as mine. My plan was only this, to give you a place where you could grow, where you could find your own strength. What you choose after that is yours, not mine." Mary's breath caught, a storm of emotions rising within her. Relief, disbelief, gratitude, and something deeper she could not yet name. "You mean I could leave if I wanted to?" "Yes." He did not hesitate. "You could return to town or to another place. You could stay. It is not my choice to make. It is yours." The weight of his words struck her harder than any blow. For 16 years, her choices had been stolen by her father's cruelty, by society's scorn, by whispers and stares. And now, here was a man telling her she held the power to choose her own future. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling down her cheeks before she could stop them. She pressed her hands to her face, shaking. No one's ever given me that." Koa's hand rested lightly on her shoulder, steady and warm. "Then take it now. Decide who you will be." Mary lowered her hands, meeting his gaze through blurred vision. For the first time, she truly believed him. She wasn't a burden. She wasn't a sail. She was a girl standing at the threshold of her own life, free to step where she wished. That night, beneath the vastness of the stars, Mary lay awake with her heart racing. His shocking plan had never been about possession or cruelty. It had been about liberation, about giving her what her own blood had denied her, the chance to choose, to live, to become. And as sleep finally claimed her, one thought pulsed in her mind with fierce certainty: she would never again let anyone take that choice away. The revelation of Koa's true plan changed everything for Mary. For days afterward, she walked through camp with a new lightness in her step, as though a door she had never known existed had been flung open wide. The weight of expectation that she must please, obey, or prove her worth was gone. For the first time in her life, she was allowed simply to be. Yet, with that freedom came something unexpected. She found her gaze lingering on Koa more often than before. At first, she dismissed it as gratitude. But gratitude alone did not make her heart quicken when he drew near, nor did it explain the warmth that rose in her chest at the sound of his laugh. One afternoon, she helped the women prepare food while Koa worked with the young men, training them in bow and spear. Her hands moved automatically, grinding corn, but her eyes strayed to where he stood, broad shoulders glinting with sweat under the sun, his voice steady as he guided the others. He moved with an ease that spoke of strength but also gentleness, never humiliating a mistake, only correcting with patience. Talula, noticing her distraction, nudged her with a sly smile. Your eyes betray you. Mary flushed crimson. I was only watching. Yes, Talula teased, but not the corn. That night, Mary sat by the fire, trying to banish the fluttering in her stomach. But when Koa sat beside her, offering a freshly cooked slice of venison, she could hardly breathe. You worked hard today, he said simply. She nodded, taking the meat. Their fingers brushed for the briefest instant, sending a spark through her that startled her so much she nearly dropped the food. Koa seemed not to notice, but the warmth lingered long after. Over the next weeks, their bond deepened in quiet ways. They rode together often, Koa showing her hidden streams and wildflower patches. She asked questions about the stars, and he pointed out constellations, telling stories his people had passed down for generations. His voice was rich and low, weaving pictures in her mind that made the night sky feel alive. Mary, in turn, shared pieces of herself she had never dared speak aloud. The ridicule she had endured in town, the ache of feeling invisible except when mocked. Koa listened without judgment, his silence a balm rather than a void. You are not invisible here, he told her once, when she struggled to speak through tears. You shine brighter than you know. Those words echoed in her heart for days. No one had ever seen her like that, not as something shameful, but as someone radiant. One evening, after a long ride, they dismounted near a ridge overlooking the valley. The sun was dipping low, painting the desert in gold and crimson. Mary stood beside him, breathless from the view and from his nearness. It's beautiful, she whispered. Yes, he said, his gaze not on the horizon, but on her. The weight of his look sent a shiver through her, and she quickly turned away, afraid of what her heart was trying to admit. She was only 16, still discovering herself. Yet the feelings blooming within her were undeniable, fragile but real, like the first wildflower pushing up through desert soil. That night, as she lay awake beneath her blanket, Mary pressed her hands to her chest, feeling her heart race. She whispered into the dark, half afraid, half hopeful, Am I falling in love? The thought terrified her, but it also filled her with wonder. Love was no longer something she thought she'd never deserve. It was slowly, quietly, becoming her reality. The seasons began to turn, the desert nights growing cooler as autumn whispered across the land. Mary had changed with them. Her body grew stronger from work and riding, her hands learned skill, and her spirit blossomed like never before. The girl who once cowered beneath her father's cruelty had become a young woman who walked, with her head high, but even as her heart steadied, one truth pressed against her daily. A choice still waited. Koa had given her freedom to leave, freedom to stay, freedom to shape her own life. That gift, more than anything, weighed heavy, because it meant her future was no longer in anyone else's hands. One morning, while gathering herbs with Talula, Mary paused to gaze across the horizon. Do you ever think, she asked softly, about what life would have been if you'd been born somewhere else? Talula tilted her head. Perhaps. But I believe we are planted where we can grow, even if the soil is harsh. The choice is what we do with it. Mary carried those words with her. That night, as the firelight flickered, she found Koa sitting alone, sharpening an arrow. Her chest tightened. She knew it was time. Koa, she began, her voice steady despite her nerves. He looked up, his eyes searching hers. Yes, I've been thinking. About everything. About what you told me. About choosing, she swallowed. I don't want to return to the town. Not to the people who laughed at me, not to the father who tried to sell me away. Koa nodded, silent, waiting. Mary's breath trembled, but her words came clear. I choose to stay. I choose this life with the people who've shown me respect. And her cheeks warmed, but she pressed on, I choose you. Not because I must, but because I want to. For the first time since she had known him, Koa's calm composure broke into a smile slow, rare, and full of warmth. He reached across the fire, taking her hand gently in his. "You honor me," he said. "But remember, this path will not always be easy. There will be hardship and loss, and the eyes of the world may never understand." "I know," Mary whispered. "But I'd rather face those storms with you than live safely in a cage built by others." The fire crackled between them, sealing the promise in the stillness of the night. In the days that followed, Mary was no longer seen as an outsider among the Apache. She was invited to join the women in their dances, taught to sing songs of the earth and sky. The children ran to her with laughter, and the men nodded in respect at her strength. Slowly, she wove herself into the fabric of the people, not as someone rescued, but as someone reborn. Koa remained her guide, her anchor, but their bond shifted. He no longer looked at her as someone needing protection, but as a partner, strong in her own right. One evening, standing together on the same ridge where they had once watched the sunset, Mary turned to him with a soft smile. "Do you remember when you told me I was fire? That what others saw as weakness was strength. I remember. You were right. And now, I want to burn, not in shame, but in life." The desert wind carried her words, and Koa's hand found hers. Together, they looked out at the vast horizon, not as a man saving a girl, but as two souls walking forward into a future Mary herself had chosen. And for the first time, she felt it completely. She was free.